Hello, this is Hamlet, and this is my Gold Challenge Mode guide to the Everbloom. This zone is very tight for time, and you'll likely have to optimize your plan for all the trash pulls very carefully to meet the mob count while meeting time. You only have 17.5 minutes, and of that you're going to be spending around 10 just in combat with bosses. We are going to open with a pull of 9 mobs, everything that's directly ahead of us in the opening hallway, and then some from this path on the left, including any wandering berserkers that are nearby, a naturalist and tender pack with some dread petals just to our left, and one lone naturalist that's a little further down. That naturalist tender pack on the left is optional, but everything else needs to be pulled in order to run down the path we're going to run down. If you do all 9, you're likely going to use all your cooldowns here. We used everything except for Bloodlust. Tenders have a channel called Enraged Growth, which you really want to make sure gets stopped. They cast it on another mob and significantly increases the damage it does for as long as they channel. Naturalists also channel Barrage of Leaves that does a lot of damage to a single random target if you allow it to reach its full duration. We'll be seeing more of those in a little bit. And Berserkers are melee mobs that, in addition to being buffed by Enraged Growth, have their own self-enrage that can be tranquilized. They'll sometimes jump away and whirlwind for a few seconds, which can actually be kind of nice because you can ignore them for a bit while dealing with everything else. That was the hardest trash pull we're going to do in this zone. It gets a lot easier as you have a routine of stuns and things that prevents the naturalists and tenders from casting very much and allows the healer to focus heavily on the tank. We're going to run up the hill along the path you just saw, which allows you to go straight to Witherbark's room. There is a more difficult jump you can make a little ways over to the right to go up onto the path that normally comes from Witherbark, but it's a lot harder, really annoying to do, and doesn't provide for much advantage over the one that we took. When you get to Witherbark's room, there are 4 pulls consisting only of naturalists and menders, 3 static pulls and a patrol. We do them as 2 and 2, which makes them pretty tame. If you are really having time problems in this zone, you can consider doing all 4 at once, but that makes another very difficult trash pack, and doing the 2 consecutively is not only hard, but will cause problems with how you allocate your cooldowns and things. When you do 2 and 2, it's totally fine. You'll have 2 menders that can cast a heal, just make sure you know who's interrupting those. The menders also cast Choking Vines, which is a stun. Interrupting that is fine if you have it to spare, otherwise it can be dispelled. And you'll have 3 or 4 naturalists each time, which again will continually try to channel Barrage of Leaves on people. Depending on how often you can stun, they might not be casting that often. When they are, people just have to watch if they're getting channeled on them and they're at low HP, or if they're getting double channeled on themselves. Most of the time it's pretty much fine if you stop their cast reasonably often. When you kill the last of the trash in this room, after a short pause, Witherbark will become active and pullable. The goal is to pull him to the back wall, wait till he gets to his first brittle bark phase, where he takes double damage, and then Bloodlust and burst him down entirely during that phase. The phase goes on until 4 water globules hit him, so you're basically trying to do the maximum possible DPS to him while delaying the water globules in whatever way possible. There really aren't many other considerations at all at this fight. You should have been pre-potting in between trash pulls as usual, but remember not to pre-pot for Witherbark because you're going to want to use a pot 30 seconds into the fight when Brittle Bark starts. So when water globules are coming at him, ways to generally stop them from hitting him are snaring them and dotting them so they eventually die, knocking them back, allowing them to hit him, which is perfectly fine if up to 3 hit him as they do nothing, or allowing them to walk over unchecked growth, at which point they disappear and turn into an ad. You only want to do that one at the very end, but it's still totally fine to have it happen. So you can leave unchecked growths in the way between them and the boss, or out of the way. Either is perfectly fine depending on how easy of a time you have stopping them from reaching him. There, as soon as he brittle barks, we bloodlust and go to town. I fat-fingered my Heart of the Wild a little earlier, so I don't get to help out with it here, but even without it, you're going to see us kill it during the duration of bloodlust, so you can do that perfectly fine, even without a healer contributing DPS. With me doing it properly, we would have killed him 5 or 10 seconds earlier than that. So as you can see, we have the first aqueous globule snared. 1 is going to hit him right now, but that's still only 1, and we already have him down almost dead. It's not going to be a big problem at all to stop these from reaching him. A knockback pretty much prevents the other ones from ever getting close, and I think right at the very end here, I'm just going to drop an unchecked growth, which causes one of them to turn into an ad, but we had more than enough time. Now, as soon as he's done here, we're going to run down the path and do our only ledge jump of the zone. It's kind of unfortunate that there's an annoying jump maneuver, but this is a part of the standard route, and given how tight the zone is on time, you really want to do it. Anyone can make the jump up onto the ledge by going at the right angle, but it's very easy with Hunter Disengage or Goblin Rocket Jump, so we just let ours go and hop into their mounts. That's going to take us up to Soul's platform, but we're going to not pull any mages or anything right now, and instead just jump right back down to Protectors, skipping the hallway to Protectors. If you can't make the jump, you can start down the hallway to Protectors and go into the first hut on your left. There's a door at the back which leads to a ramp that brings you up to the Protector's ledge without any jumping tricks. There are about 4 mobs in the way, so even if you skip some with CC, you'll have to cut some mobs from this run, like the 2 extras we pulled in the opening pull or some mages later on. Overall, it works out slightly slower though. So on Protectors themselves, they've taken away the mechanic that limits how you interrupt them, so you can now interrupt however you want. The most important spell is Gola's Revitalizing Waters, which is a heal. Make sure that has an assigned interrupt every time. And Gola's Rapid Tides is good as well. That can be purged if it ever goes off, but interrupting it is cleaner since it does eliminate the cooldowns on the mob's abilities if it goes off, so it can lead to some annoying combos if it's up for even a short time. If you ever have an interrupting problem, you can also stun him, which is a good backup option. Telu's casts aren't quite as important. Briarskin is a good one to interrupt, just to save yourself the need for more purging. It can do quite a lot of damage if it sits on Gola. It's a good one for your tank to interrupt while they're over there. In fact, I should have mentioned, we keep Dulhu over by Telu and away from Gola. That's slightly worse for DPS, but because Dulhu occasionally knocks people back, it just seemed cleaner. So your tank can keep that locked down, and then if your group still has interrupts to spare, you can stop Bramble Patch. That's not really a big deal, people occasionally have to move out of it, it'll only be a couple times. It's also a good spell to Dark Sim. As soon as you kill Gola, now you have the interrupts free to stop pretty much everything that Telu does, so then you don't have to worry about it after that point. Once you're down to just 2 mobs, it's pretty much just taking the time to DPS them down. The fight's easy and it's a little slow. We focus on Dulhu and make Telu the secondary target, since the goal is to end the fight as quickly as possible, not to focus fire one target. We actually considered bringing a mage or 2 from Soul's platform on the way down here to kill them with free DPS during this time, but it wound up being a bit too much of a hassle. It's something we probably would have considered if we hadn't come up with other efficient ways to get the mage kills in to complete our trash count without taking a lot of extra time. As it is, we're going to finish off Telu and Dulhu around hopefully the same time. Then we're going to turn back up and go to the hallway towards the spider. One person, in our case the hunter, is going to double back towards Soul's platform and pull 3 of the mages with us down in towards the spider's room to fight while we do the first phase of the spider encounter, the mini trash gauntlet. The gauntlet is timed and about 2 minutes long and very easy on its own, so it's a big waste to do it without taking the opportunity to use extra DPS capacity to score some free mob kills. We're going to pull in the big spider and 3 mages, like I said. 3 mages is pretty busy, 2 mages is easier and is also acceptable. Be careful as you're running into the room. If the spiders start to spawn and then they run out into the hallway to chase anyone who's still out here, it can reset the encounter. So we actually just took a couple extra seconds to start it until everyone was just about here, including the tank dragging the big spider that sometimes pulls him back. Once you get in here, the spiders that spawn during the encounter are pretty straightforward. You have to watch for Gorge Bursters who will fixate one target and you have to make sure they don't reach him. But even then, as long as there's enough distance between them, you don't have to focus DPS too hard to get them down safely. You should be able to kill the infested Venom Fang from outside pretty easily while you deal with the first wave, probably even before the mages get there because they're a little slow to run. Here are the first 2 mages arriving. We actually trapped the third a little further back. The idea was that we would deal with 2 at once and then deal with the third one a little later since we have a lot of time here. You want to have your puller grab any 3 mages that are patrolling around on the lower level of Soul's room. There are a total of 5 that are doing that. You don't want to pull the 3 that are channeling on Soul because those don't spawn spore images, so they're less valuable to kill during the free time you have here. We seem to have gotten 2 ice callers. They're not so bad, you just move out of Frozen Snap. Free interrupts are perfectly good to throw on the frost bolts while you're dealing with everything else. Once they die and turn into a spore image, they stop casting Frozen Snap or whatever the special ability of that class of mage is, so you just keep working them down while you focus more on other mobs. They're still fine targets to interrupt. Here, one Ice Caller is dead and the other one is almost dead, and sometime pretty soon we're going to let the third mage run in. I believe it's a Pyromancer, which always run a little slowly because they keep stopping to cast Dragon's Breath. That's actually the most important cast to watch for anytime you're fighting mages. The Fire Mage's Dragon's Breath. you should always make sure you know who's interrupting that. There it is coming in right there, while everything else is almost dead. This is the final wave of spiders, so by the time Zeratak comes down right now, all that we're going to have left is one Pyromancer and a little bit of a Spore image. There's Zeratak and the first Pale one. The first Pale one you don't generally have to worry about reaching Zeratak because she doesn't consume it right away, so you can cleave it down at your leisure. Every other Pale one that spawns during the fight you have to kill pretty quickly or CC in some way that leaves it away from her. We generally expected to see 3 during the fight, so we would kill the first one easily and then CC the other 2 with Paralyze and Hex, and never actually have to divert boss DPS. I think in this case we killed the second one also, because we weren't sure if we were going to get 4 due to being slightly behind on the trash. It was only a little bit behind though, it was still very worth it to get the third mage done. So this consume actually got a little close, but like I mentioned, if you have enough CCs, you should never have to deal with one. Out of Zeratak's casts, the only one that's really important to interrupt is Venomous Sting. It's a long, heavy, undispellable dot on a random target. The others aren't so big a deal, but you can always feel free to throw spare interrupts on once that one is assigned. Coming up very soon is going to be the third Pale Orc, which we're just going to make sure to paralyze out of the way, and in this case she's low enough that we're never going to get a 4th. If we did CC the second and then plan to Hex the third as we would normally do, that would also be fine. Hex is especially helpful because you can just let her start consuming it, and then Hex will actually interrupt the cast, so there's pretty much no danger of having that go wrong. Either way, if you plan that out, you can save a lot of time actually having to kill Pale Orcs. As soon as she's down, we're going to charge back out down the hallway to Soul's room and kill however many mages we need to get to either 28 or 29 on the mob count. So here we're looking to pull 4 or 5. If you followed our exact route, that's going to mean that you're going to leave either 0 or 1 mages up on the lower level of Soul's room. It basically depends on how conveniently they're positioned for pulling all but one of them. Since they walk around a lot, you can never predict exactly. Here we have one conveniently standing by himself on the left, so we just drop a CC, I think, to make sure it never aggroes, and we pull the other 4. 4 mages is a pretty easy pull, so one of the advantages to doing the mages in different blocks, the 3 in the hallway and leaving 2 for after Soul, is that you never actually have a hard mage pull. 4 is easy, as you can see demonstrated by me. Even if you get hit by everything, there's not actually a healing problem. 5 or 6 gets pretty intense. The 3 channeling around Soul, as I mentioned, don't leave Spore images. Instead, as soon as all 3 are dead, she becomes active, so you can pull back a little bit if you want to make sure not to aggro her. You try to work down the one that will drop a Spore image fast so you can start working on it. Because of the way we split up the mage trash, this is the only time in the zone that we have to take time burning down a Spore image. We do finish it off though, so that we can get a clean start and pre-pots and focus DPS on Soul. Soul is a pretty good DPS race. We would like to Bloodlust on her if possible, but if you take the route we take, then it won't be back up from Witherbark, so we just use everything else. With me using Heart of the Wild correctly and all of our other timers, we're going to have her at 35% by the time she casts her second Parasitic Growth. And that's the one key fact about this fight. You want to interrupt exactly 1 Parasitic Growth over the course of the whole fight, and I recommend the second one. By the time she casts the first one, which is coming up soon, the fight's still quite easy, so you have no reason to transition her out of Fire Phase. Make sure everyone in the group knows the fight mechanics so that you don't have any errant interrupts. By the time the second Parasitic Growth is going off, you're going to have 3 Fire Flowers down, and they'll be just starting to go off for the first time, so it hasn't really been too disruptive to your DPS yet, but it's a good time to interrupt and transition her to Frost. You can move across the room as the transition is coming and outrange the fire rings for the rest of the encounter. The damage can build up, so if you're going a little slower than we are, you sort of have to watch for a lot of random damage at the end of Frost phase, but the first cycle or so of Frost before the first Parasitic Growth is quite low damage. You're just going to have these Frost Bolts and the occasional Fireballs from the Spore image that are also fair game to interrupt, and some Blizzards that are easy to move out of. If you kill her fast, it never gets hard. Make sure that, again, you're watching this last Parasitic Growth and that nobody interrupts it, regardless of whether they're trying to interrupt other things. Accidentally transitioning her to Arcane is very deadly in challenge mode. As soon as she dies, you have just over 30 seconds until the RP ends that lets you walk through the vines in order to get to Yalnu. We use this time to get the last 2 mobs that we need. That's why I mentioned before that you want to be at around 28 or 29 when you start Archmage Soul. There are 3 mobs conveniently up here. Actually, maybe it would have been fine to just kill all 3 of them. But the point is you have about the right amount of time to easily get 1 kill or 2 if you need it, and then you can just ignore the Spore images from those 2 2 mobs because they will de-aggro as you go through the portal to Stormwind, so it's just another way to never have to bother taking time to kill spore images. So 2 works out perfectly that we're done with them as soon as we go through the vines, and because we ran away as we killed both of them, the spore images never even entered combat with us, so we got a nice combat break in order to pre-pot and do all the other sort of stuff that we would like to do for Yalnu. If you get to Yalnu with 2.5 minutes left, and if you followed our route, you'll also have your Bloodlust up, and all your 3-minute DPS cooldowns will also come up at some point during it. You should be in very good shape. Nothing at this boss should be too much of a problem. It simply takes a very long time, so you should know when you get here whether you have enough or not. For reference, on our pace, we started Zeratak's Gauntlet with about 9.5 minutes left on the clock, and we pulled Sol with 5 minutes left, and we pulled Yalnu with a little over 2.5, as you saw. We're going to finish the zone with 30 seconds left, which is a pretty good cushion given how tight this had been in our practice attempts. There's the first Genesis. We get 2 over the course of the fight. In general, it's good to figure out who can run around and stomp them easily without sacrificing too much DPS. DPS generally stays focused on the boss full time, except when we have to break out in tangles as you see here. The ones on players have low HP and should be broken out right away. The ones on mages have more HP, but the mages can actually contribute a lot of damage over the course of the fight, so especially if it's early in the fight, you probably want to break them out. The other adds that spawn aren't a big deal. They generally die to incidental damage, plus the mage is bringing them down pretty quickly. The Gnarled Ancients and the Vicious Mandragoras have cones that you have to watch out for, the Ancient Swipe and the Mandragora's Cone Breath. The little Sproutlings have a stacking dot that doesn't matter too much because they die so easily. So overall, you just want to bring the boss down. We just bloodlusted here because people's 3-minute cooldowns are back up from Soul. It's not the most ideal place to bloodlust on this fight because it doesn't buff the mages, who do a good chunk of your total damage over the course of the fight. It depends on whether you need to use it for Witherbark. If you find you can do the Witherbark fight cleanly, it might be better to bloodlust for a hard trash pull at the start and then Archmage Soul, rather than bloodlusting for Witherbark and Yalnu. That could be something you could think about. So overall, we didn't have to do anything too extreme in this run. The only large trash pack was the one at the start, which is always a good place to have a hard pull to learn. Everything else was just about finding efficient places to pack in the mob kills into the little free time we had. It is very difficult to find the time for that in this zone, and I would recommend the exact route and pulls that we used here as a starting point for any group that's trying to figure out how to pare their time down to gold. As you can see, if done cleanly, it does get you that with a reasonable cushion. Good luck in your own attempts, and thank you for watching.